What's going on, Raptors fans? The Raptors are back and so am I. I'm here with a season preview for this upcoming season. I'm going to give you guys the 3 things that I'm keeping an eye on for the whole of this upcoming season. But before that, I'm just going to ask you guys to like, share, subscribe to this channel. The algorithms don't know how to pick out the good content from the not good content, so they need your help to do so. If you're new here, if you're not new here, click the like on this video, click the subscribe for this channel, and share it to all the Raptors fans you know. So one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on is the size of the rotation, which is how many players play on a night in, night out basis. Last year, there was like a good 6-7 week stretch where the Raptors were playing with a 7-man rotation, meaning 5 starters and 2 guys off the bench, and everyone was playing a lot of minutes. And that's something a lot of people talked about and expressed concern with. And ultimately, Thad Young was brought in and that rotation expanded to 8 players. And then eventually Khem Birch got some spot starts, and that ended up being a 9-man rotation. But the key thing I want to point out here is that this rotation has the potential to be a lot bigger this year than it was last year. You look at the 8 players that we would play consistently towards the end of last year, we've added Otto Porter Jr. to that. So that's 9 players in the rotation. But I think there's a pretty solid potential that a guy like Delano Banton, maybe Malachi Flynn, definitely not both, definitely only one of them, and probably Delano Banton, but there's a chance for that to be the 10th player in the rotation. And then I have the personal belief that one of Khem Birch or Koloko will play night in, night out this year. And the reason I hold that belief is drafting Christian Koloko shows that the Raptors do intend to play with a center. They intend to play with a rim protector, someone that can play drop coverage. So even if Koloko isn't ready to play, I think it makes sense to play with Khem Birch to fill that role, just so the players around Birch and Koloko can be used to playing with that kind of player when Koloko is ready, and there's no adjustment period required when Koloko eventually is ready to play. And the main reason I think this works out is that even when Birch did play, he was a guy that would play around 15 minutes, and Koloko, if he plays in his rookie season, probably will only play around 15 minutes as well. So the reality is, it makes sense for one of them to play. And I think that will happen off the bench this year for sure. So that's one player. That's one player in the rotation that I think will be added to the basic 9-man rotation that we have set up if you look at who played last year and Otto Porter Jr. joining the team. Then you add the possibility of Delano Banton being added to the rotation. That's 11 players. And you have to look at it like this. You don't carry an 11-player rotation into the playoffs. Teams usually cut it down to 7-8 players by that point. So you have to wonder, who are the players that stick around for the playoff rotation? Who are the players that don't? Because the reality is, I think that there will be a pretty big regular season rotation that gets cut down towards the end of the season, and we'll see who makes the cut. The second thing I'll be keeping an eye on is the half-court offense. Now, I love what this team is doing defensively. I love what this team is doing offensively in transition, but in half-court offense situations, we're not that good of a team. We're fairly average. And the 2 contributing factors to why we're average realistically are the fact that we don't have a lot of 3-point shooting, and we don't have players that can consistently command double teams and open up situations for other players. As for the 3-point shooting, the thing is, last year we didn't have our 3-point shooters healthy a lot. OG missed a decent amount of time. Fred VanVleet missed some time, and a lot of the times when he was playing towards the end of last year, he wasn't himself. And Gary Trent Jr. also missed some time here and there. So there's that. And there's the fact that we added Otto Porter Jr., so there is potential for there to be more 3-point shooting this year. And in theory, that should help players like Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, Precious Achiuwa, players that have a lot of potential at getting to the basket and finishing. These are players that could benefit from that, and hopefully that could help our half-court offense. Now, with regards to commanding double teams, realistically, you probably look at Scotty and Pascal to be those guys. Pascal mainly because he was a player that was, towards the end of last year, a player that could command double teams at a fairly high rate. And Scotty's a player who, that's something you envision his long-term role being, so you know that that's what he's working towards, and that's where his development should be headed. So that's something to watch for with him. because even though he's fairly early in his career, you know that's something he's thinking about and trying to get better at. Last thing I'll be paying attention to is how the seasons of OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. go. Why am I doing that? Because they both have player options at the end of this upcoming season, and they have the ability to be free agents next offseason. And there's a very high likelihood that that happens because they're young players with upside, and young players with upside tend to do really well in free agency these days. So the thing to consider here is that you can't let them leave in free agency. Now, I'm going to do a video later on breaking down the upcoming offseason's cap situation and anything that could come with that. But to keep it short, if both of them leave in free agency, there's only going to be enough cap space to realistically replace one of them and then replace the other with a $5 to $6 million signing, and that's going to be a severe downgrade. Or you could split the money up to replace both of them with fairly decent downgrades in terms of both of the guys you bring in. And if one of them leaves in free agency and one of them stays, there's going to be next to no money to replace the guy that leaves. So the key thing to consider here is that we suffer if we let them leave in free agency. And an important factor here is, do they want to stay with the Toronto Raptors long term? Does Gary Trent Jr. need to start to want to be a Toronto Raptor, or would he still want to be a part of the team as a bench player? Does OG Anunoby need a certain amount of shots to want to continue as a Toronto Raptor, or would he consider leaving if he's not a big enough part of the offense? These are things we probably won't have access to as fans, but these are things the Raptors need to consider, because if you let them go to free agency and they have a desire to advance their careers by having the biggest role possible, that's not something we can offer them. We can offer them money. We have their bird rights, so we can one up any offer in terms of money. But if they want more touches or they want a bigger role, we either have to assure them of that or we have to let them walk. And that's a dangerous game to play. So the Raptors have to keep that in mind. But realistically, from their perspective, they either need to be re-signed or traded. Now, the key thing to consider here is that if you're going to re-sign them, what is their market like, and how does that impact the Raptors' thinking long-term with regards to the salary cap? We're already paying guys like Pascal and Fred, and there's a lot of rumors about them possibly being extended. Precious is going to get re-signed. Scotty's going to get re-signed. There's a lot of money that's going to be paid for the future. How much money do you think OG Anunoby should be paid? How much money do you think Gary Trent Jr. should be paid? And could you possibly get outbid in free agency? So with those things in mind, the Raptors have to call it. By the trade deadline, by February, the Raptors have to call, do we trade this guy or do we put the money up in the offseason? And that's going to be a key thing to watch. So ultimately, how their seasons go, how their development looks from last season to this season. These are things that are going to help you project what their years going forward are going to be. And those are ultimately big things that go into the decision of re-signing them this offseason or trading them before the trade deadline. If there's anything that you guys will be paying attention to in particular for this upcoming season, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think. I'm excited for the season. I know you guys are excited for this season. And this being the first season that I'm doing content for, here's to this season being great so that this content is happy and jovial and not depressing in the slightest. I'll see you guys around. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, and find me on all socials at Toronto Hoop Talk.